Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from Florida.
Mr. President, we're now on the 34th day of this partial government shutdown. For 34 days, the men and women who are serving our federal government at DHS have been forced to work without pay and without certainty about their future. As I said on the floor yesterday, this is the third time in the last 6 months that the hardworking Americans who work to keep us safe every day had to worry about how they're going to pay mortgages, pay rent, buy gas, and bring home groceries to feed their kids. I think that's clearly unfair and it's un-American. And while the American people are standing in line for hours at the airport and watching this unfold on the evening news, they're asking a reasonable question. What do Democrats actually want to accomplish by shutting down the Department of Homeland Security? Now, yesterday I talked about some of the stories of TSA agents. They're not getting paid. They're worried about their mortgages, their rent, put food on the table. They can't send their kids to camp. They can't go on vacation. And I think in 5 days, on the 27th, they lose a full paycheck. But let's talk about some of the other people. Let me talk about Amber Britt. In a CNN story published yesterday, Amber Britt, who has multiple sclerosis and cannot stand for long periods, told the reporter that she was forced to pay a stranger to push her wheelchair through the jam line. She arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport on Friday, expecting to use the accessibility line like she normally does. Instead, she found pure chaos. On Friday in Atlanta, a line spilled out of the security checkpoint, past the main screen area and into the airport's atrium. Unable to stand, she had to pay a complete stranger to push her wheelchair through the jam. She said, normally I just go straight through. She told CNN, I just don't understand. Pay your workers because we need them. Amber's right. People do not understand why Democrats are forcing this on them. I think we owe it to folks to expose the why behind this terrible shutdown because the answer matters. Thankfully, my colleague from Vermont recently gave us an answer to this question during his recent appearance on C-SPAN's ceasefire program. Now, the junior senator of Vermont is a wonderful person to work with. We've worked on bills together during time in the Senate, and I always felt like you could have a good conversation with him about the issues. But what he said to C-SPAN is pretty revealing. He gave the rest of us a peek into the thinking behind Democrats deciding to shut down DHS. So let's take his statements one by one. The junior senator from Vermont began by saying, quote, in all candor, with what has happened with ICE, I think it's very hard for us to come to some agreement, end quote. Now, that's honesty. It's been clear to me and a lot of people for a long time that Democrats do not have any intention of working with Republicans to find common ground on reforming ICE operations. President Trump has made offer after offer to Democrats to address their concerns with ICE. I know the junior senator from Alabama has tried to meet with them multiple times. President Trump is trying to meet this moment with reasonable reforms to how ICE operates. Unfortunately, my Democrat colleagues won't engage. In fact, they've only met with Republicans to negotiate one time. Now, it's clear why. As the junior senator from Vermont said, there isn't a belief among Democrats that they will accept any terms proposed by Republicans. So we've now established that the shutdown isn't about working in a bipartisan way to solve problems. Let's move to the next statement from my colleague from Vermont. He said, quote, the other reality is that ICE got forward funded about 3 years in the one big beautiful bill. So that is, ironically, it's not really affecting ICE, end quote. Here, the junior senator for Vermont is admitting that this shutdown, which Democrats caused by claiming that they need to defund ICE to force bipartisan reforms, isn't actually impacting ICE agents at all. Now, the folks at ICE that don't only work in law enforcement are being hurt. Now, there's a lot of people at ICE that are not law enforcement. They aren't covered by the money my colleague referenced in the big beautiful bill. So the support staff, the public affairs staff, HR, IT professionals, leadership, none of them, it's my understanding, are being paid. In addition, more than 50,000 TSA agents that aren't getting paid. They're all being hurt by the Democrat DHS shutdown. Just to make sure we're all keeping track, the junior senator from Vermont said, quote, "In all candor, what has happened with ICE, I think it's very hard for us to come to an agreement," end quote. Then he said, "The other reality is that ICE got forward funded about 3 years in the big, beautiful bill. So this is ironically, it's not really affecting ICE." So in these two sentences, my Democrat colleague from Vermont has now said that Democrats don't have the intention of reaching a bipartisan solution with Republicans. And he knows that the agencies at the center of this dispute, ICE and CBP, are not running out of money. They're fine. Now, there's people at ICE and CBP who are not getting paid. And yet here we are, TSA agents, most of the people at DHS, everyone at ICE who isn't law enforcement, they're going hungry. We heard the stories. They don't have the money to pay the rent, pay their mortgages, put food on the table, pay for dance recitals, pay for camps, pay for sports, none of these things. Now, here's what he said next, quote, "If we're able to open up the rest of government and focus on the ICE issue, it may allow us then to have a discussion. I think it's overdue. The border is secure now. It wasn't under Biden. You say that, and that's true," end quote. So we know that. We know that under Biden, the border was completely wide open, and criminals just flocked into this country. And not one of my Democrat colleagues said a word. They never want to talk about Lincoln Riley, Rachel Moran, Jocelyn Ngari, murdered by illegal aliens. Now, he ended his point by saying this, quote, "It's ripe for us to have a sensible discussion about a reasonable immigration plan in a reasonable way to deal with folks who don't have legal status," end quote. Now, I'm from a state that we have a lot of immigrants, right? I believe in immigration reform. I'm always willing to have a conversation about it. I've actually proposed changes at TPS. I've proposed things that's always been blocked by my Democrat colleagues. And I think we ought to fix our immigration system so the only people who come into our country are people who actually want to work, not go on programs, American programs, and what help build our capitalist country. I think that's the ones who should be allowed in. Unfortunately, that's not the type of reform the Democrats are holding out for. They want amnesty. My friend, the junior senator from Vermont, is talking about amnesty. He's talking about using a government shutdown, using the paychecks of TSA workers, using 3 or 4 hour security lines, using the pain felt by disabled Americans like Ambria Britt, who had to pay a stranger to push her wheelchair through security, as leverage to open a conversation about amnesty to people who are in this country illegally. Now, and here's the part that should make every American blood boil. There's no Democrat proposal. I haven't seen it. Mr. President, have you seen it? I haven't seen a proposal. I haven't seen anything. No plan, no bill, no written offer. Weeks and weeks of offers from the White House, dozens of failed Senate votes, and the American people still cannot read a single piece of paper that says what Democrats actually want. The only thing Democrats keep harping on is banning ICE from wearing masks. So let's dig into that point now. This is important because it really exposes the disconnect between political posturing and human consequences. Democrat senators have introduced legislation to ban ICE agents from wearing masks during enforcement operations and require them to display their names or badge numbers at all times. House Democrats introduced a companion bill, and several states that introduced or passed similar measures. Now, on the surface, it sounds like accountability, right? I actually agree with making sure badges are visible for uniformed law enforcement officers. It seems like a common sense idea to me. But let's talk about ICE agents having to wear masks, not being allowed to wear a mask. Now, there are radical anti-ICE activists. You might know that, Mr. President, but I think most people do, right? They're all over the country. They have built and maintained websites that catalog photographs of alleged ICE employees, organized by state, searchable by region. That should scare us. They encourage their fellow activists to hunt our law enforcement and give them all the tools to do so. Now, here's what's already happened. ICE has reported a 1,000% increase, that's tenfold, increase in assaults on officers. That's even more than tenfold, isn't it? Yeah, tenfold. And an 8,000% increase in death threats against officers and their families. A Dallas gunman fired multiple rounds at an ICE field office from a nearby rooftop and used apps specifically to track the locations of ICE agents before the attack. In San Francisco and LA, a mob surrounded ICE agents in the street and at their offices. These agents were assaulted and threatened. Now, ICE agents are just like you and me. They're normal Americans. They've got families. They love their kids. They have grandkids. They love their grandkids. They have great neighbors, great friends, and they're simply doing the job that they were hired to do to keep every American safe. They're doing what police do, what sheriffs do. They are working every day to enforce the laws of this country that we passed. But many of my Democrat colleagues want to see them as monsters. Now, here's the difference. The TSA workers, they're going to work every day, enforcing the laws, trying to keep us safe. And they're under a lot of stress because they're not getting paid. The ICE agents might be getting paid right now, but they're being attacked by Democrats that act like they're monsters. Their families are worried about them. They're receiving, they're worried about getting a threatening midnight phone call because an activist website posted their loved one's photograph and home address, so their families are worried. That's what the mask ban would enable, not accountability, exposure. And for people who are already doing their jobs under impossible conditions, that additional threat is not a policy debate, is a danger to their life. Now, let's be clear. I don't think any of us want ICE to wear a mask. I wish they didn't have to. But if wearing a mask keeps a law enforcement officer and their family safe from being attacked by radical anti-ICE activists, I'm all for it. Now, I support measures that keep our police accountable to the people they serve and protect. I believe that when I was governor, we started bringing body cameras in when I was governor of Florida. The White House has proposed body cameras, and I completely agree with that proposal. Cameras create accountability. When I just flew through the Denver airport, I saw a couple of the law enforcement officers. They had cameras, and they thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Complete accountability for everybody, them and for the public. Cameras create accountability through recorded evidence and supervised review without turning every officer into a target for harassment and violence. Mr. President, Democrats still press that they want to, quote, have a conversation. They want to, quote, discuss. Meanwhile, most of the more than 260,000 workers at the Department of Homeland Security are going without paychecks. And your gate security lines stretch around the block. Now, Democrats can disagree with us on immigration enforcement, and that is their right. But shutting down an entire federal agency, refusing to pay the hundreds of thousands of people who simply want to show up and serve the federal government by protecting the American people, all to force a so-called negotiation on immigration policy that we've never seen written down. That's not governance, that's hostage taking. Let me remind you, the average salary of a TSA agent, Mr. President, what do you think the average salary is? $50,000. Now, these are the folks Democrats are withholding paychecks from. Americans making about $50,000 a year. What do we make? U.S. senators, we make $174,000 a year. And I've tried. I've had a bill, no budget, no pay. My Democratic colleagues have always blocked it because they refuse to go without being paid. But they're okay with other people not being paid. So while the folks at TSA are working class Americans fighting every day to live their dreams, guess what the average net worth for a Democrat in the Senate is? About $3 million. Now, we're here to shame anybody. I'm glad they worked hard, they got rich, they've been successful in life. I worked my butt off. I've been very successful, and I don't apologize for a second. But in addition to donating my entire Senate salary every year, I'm also not the one sitting here totally today denying a paycheck to the more than 260,000 hardworking Americans at DHS. Now, I think Democratic colleagues ought to have skin in the game. The last time Democrats shut down the government, hurt our federal workers, one of my Democrat colleagues said that he couldn't go without his Senate paycheck because he has a mortgage to pay. Well, guess what? So do every federal employee at DHS. They're probably paying the rent or they have a mortgage. The people Democrats aren't paying right now, they have bills to pay. It frustrates me. It makes you sick that a member of the U.S. Senate says that voted to say somebody else can't get paid. They said they have to get paid. I think that's insulting. Imagine how it makes someone at TSA to hear that. A U.S. senator needs to get his paycheck when he's making $174,000, but you at DHS, good luck. I think that's pretty disgusting. I don't think if Congress shuts down government, members should get paid. Now, I have a bill to make that happen. I had a colleague that had a similar bill earlier today. My No Budget, No Pay Act would keep everyone in this chamber from getting a paycheck if we can't provide them to the hardworking men and women who work in our federal government. Look, I think there needs to be personal consequences for politicians that want to play games with other people's lives and cut off their paychecks. So I think we need to pass my No Budget, No Pay Act. Again, this is a simple proposal that says that members of Congress can't complete our basic constitutional job of funding the government, the whole government, not part, not some, but all of it. We shouldn't get paid. So I urge my colleagues to consider this. What about the mortgages of DHS workers? What about their grocery bills? What about their kids' camp? What about their daughter's dance recital? I think we ought to care about them. So I don't get it. I can't see how a Democrat colleague can get on a plane, fly home, probably go to the front of the line, look at these unpaid TSA agents in the eye, walk to the gate in front of all of them, past Americans who just wait in line for 4 hours and not feel some shame. More than 260,000 American families are going without a paycheck, but my Democrat colleagues are still cashing theirs. Democrats shouldn't be shutting down the government and risking others' paychecks without being willing to put their paychecks on the line, too. So I'm not going to ask for a UC, but I wish at some point we would pass my No Budget, No Pay so we all have skin in the game. If part of the Republican or Democrats, whoever, are going to shut down government, then they ought to do the same thing that they're doing to other people to themselves. I yield the floor.